Hi guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I want to share with you how I color with alcohol markers. And this has been a requested video, and specifically in this book by R.J. Hampson, A Frog's Tale. And so I thought I'd come on here and share it with you guys. I felt like playing with the alcohol markers. I have a little bit of time right now, so I thought I'd come and share with you how I have been using them. Now, alcohol markers to me is quite a fairly new medium because I didn't start using them until, is it this year maybe? Before that, I've been using water-based markers, but I've been really enjoying the alcohol markers, especially in these Amazon books, Amazon quality paper, specifically the UK one. I've not tried US paper. I have tried Amazon Japan paper, which actually I really do like, and I haven't tried the R.J. Hampson hardback paper yet, so I'm still going to have to try that out. But yeah, I tried it in this book. I enjoyed it. I've been using my alcohol markers in other books as well, like Matchstick Mouse books, Michael O'Brien, yeah, his books. And I've started using them in mythographic books as well. And so yeah, I thought I'd come in here and share with you how I use them. Now, I will be using the Ohuhu alcohol markers, and it's the Honolulu series. And I have a couple of sets because they were sent to me for review. So I have 3 sets of the Honolulu series. I have a 96 pastel set, a 120 set, and then the full 320 set. And I thought I would use the one in the middle, 120. Reason being, I wanted to show you guys a little bit of shading with the alcohol markers, which you can't do much of with the pastel colors only. I love using the pastel set because I like to use them for basing. But when I want to consider doing shading as well, prior to putting down pencils, then I need a few darker colors, which we have in the 120 set. And then the 320 set is a little bit excessive in that a lot of people may not want to go all out and get the whole set, especially when you don't use them that much. Something like the 120 set would be an ideal set to use. So yeah, I have the 120 set here, and I'll use all the colors that I use in this video will be just from that set, okay? And then the markers I have is the one with the brush tip and the broad tip, or the chisel tip. So that's the chisel tip, and that's the brush tip. I tend to use the brush tip side a lot more, and you can get thicker strokes, you can get thin strokes with it, and the broad side is good for backgrounds, but I think you also get the narrow, or is it bullet tip, which is a lot thinner. So depending on what books you have, maybe you have a lot more Amazon books than I do, which have smaller details, maybe the small tip would work. So whatever works for you, but for me, this one is perfect. I prefer the brush tip more than any other. Now, the first thing is, with regards to alcohol markers that I've learned, is you have to swatch your colors out. I would recommend, especially if you have a big set. Reason being, yes, you could always test it out when you're coloring before you start coloring and see which colors you want, but you'll have to sit there and wait for it to dry to see what the real color is, because the alcohol markers tend to get lighter when they dry. So they lay down quite dark, and as they're drying, they become lighter. So it's good to have swatches. And so this is my swatch 1 and swatch 2 for the 120 set. And so I find them really useful. But I know some people are not swatchers like me, so you may not want to do it, but just keep in mind that yes, they do dry lighter. So when you are doing your pages, you can accordingly choose colors. So yeah, I prefer swatching them out. Now, a big question a lot of you guys have been asking me in comments is, which markers do I prefer? Do I prefer water-based markers or alcohol markers? Now, I used to use water-based markers only for a long time until, like I said, this year. And I really like water-based markers. I have just 1 set of the Tombow Dual brush pens. I don't have any other water-based markers. And like I said, alcohol markers, I only have Ohuhu. So I have Ohuhu for alcohol and Tombows for my water-based. Now, I have realized that I used to use my Tombos in one-sided books as well, but Amazon paper can chew up the brush tips quite quickly. They're quite delicate, the Tombos, and they're quite pricey, and so I never really liked using them directly to the paper in my Amazon books, and so I used to use them off a palette. So in one-sided books, I am beginning to prefer using alcohol markers. The other reason I like using alcohol markers is for backgrounds. A lot of people say they get a lot of streaking with their water-based markers. That's always going to happen with water-based markers, and to some extent with alcohol markers too, because you do need to work quite quick depending on the paper you're working on. Because if the ink gets soaked in quickly or dries up quickly, you'll also get streaks with alcohol markers. So it depends on what kind of effect you want. But with water-based markers, other than when you're using it on specific marker paper, you'll always get streaking. So I would never use them for backgrounds unless I'm going to color over it with pencils and cover up the streaking. So I prefer alcohol markers for backgrounds, for large areas. I prefer alcohol markers for blending. They blend better on normal paper than water-based markers, which need specific paper for you to blend directly onto the page. And for one-sided books, I guess alcohol markers are really good. But I do like my water-based markers a lot. I like to use them, obviously, in double-sided books. I never want to ruin another page in my double-sided books. If I don't want the bleed-through, I will use water-based markers. So even if it's a single-sided book that I don't want to see any bleed-through in, or a specific page I'm doing, maybe a PDF or something, and I don't want it to bleed through, I'll use water-based markers. And the advantage for me for water-based markers is I can use it off a palette. So you can get a variety of shades from one pen, depending on how much you dilute it with water on a palette. So I use the Caran d'Ache palette here, the smooth side. So that's the smooth side, that's a rough side. I use the smooth side for my Tombos, and I can use them off the palette, and I like that versatility of it. So I really do like my water-based. So I think it completely depends on what you're using it for. So I like them both. I would be using both depending on the situation. So I don't prefer one over the other. I'm starting to enjoy using both. All right, now that's a lot of chatting. I guess we should probably get to it. And the page I have chosen is this one right here. Now, before I get started, what I want to just share with you guys is that you can use alcohol markers in sort of two ways. One is literally just for basing. So when I do basing, I'd rather go for a very light color, which is where I use my pastel colors quite a lot, the pastel set. And I like to go and just base it, and then I just use my pencils over the top to put in the shadows and the highlights. So one way is literally just to base your page. Another option is shading. So you could put in some shading with your pens, your markers to begin with. So you have your dark, medium, light, or even just two colors, but put in a bit of shadowing from the word go when you've started using your markers, and then use your pencils over the top. Obviously, there's a third way, is don't use your pencils over the top. You don't have to. So if you're putting in some shadows and highlights with just your markers and you want to color with just markers, that is perfect too. So maybe use the second method of putting in shadows and then just leave it at that. I love pencil finishes, so I will always tend to go to using a pencil over the top, because even though I enjoy coloring with markers and, you know, you're using paint and paint pens and things like that, I really enjoy the feel of pencil to paper. And for me, that's the most therapeutic side of coloring. And so for me, I have to put pencil to paper to really enjoy a page. And so I will always tend to go and put pencil over the top. So I'm going to be sharing with you my methods. All right. Now I have done another page in this book, this one right here, and I used alcohol markers on this one, and I really enjoyed it. So for example, for the background, I just used one shade of alcohol marker, and then I went over Oh no, actually I used 2 shades. I just realized I did a bit of shadows, but then I went over with a little bit of pencil. But yes, okay, so I used 2 to give in the shadows. For the vines, I also used 2 shades, but then I went over with my pencils. And then I used, yeah, my Albrecht Dürer pencils over the top. So for example, for the flowers, for smaller elements, I literally just based it. So you can see that there's no 2 shades for like the coat, of Mr. Fogarty and the sofa, or the armchair that he's sitting on. So yeah, in certain areas I won't put any shadowing, I'll just base. In certain areas I'll put in some shadowing, and it's literally just depends on how I'm feeling, and whether I just want to get to my pencils or not. For smaller elements, I would probably not do much shading. I would just probably base and then put in my pencil work. For larger elements where I have a little bit more space, I will tend to put in some shading and then go over with my pencils and deepen up and do all my lovely coloring with pencils. So I'll show you sort of both. And then just so you're aware, I do have a color along in this book, Mythographic Wild Winter by Joseph Kattenbang. And I had done this color along, a full color along on the channel, and I used alcohol markers for this. And I did a lot of shading with the alcohol markers for the cacti and for the purple flowers. So I used light shades and really dark shades and put in some shading before I went over with pencils. So if you're interested to see me do a color along with that, there's already at least one with alcohol markers, and then my pencils over the top. The background, I think, was maybe Neocolor 2s. But yeah, so that was really fun doing it on that page, and that's a page I think I have started using alcohol markers in a mythographic book. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking that out if you want me to see the shading. I didn't use any alcohol markers in any of the others, but yeah, so just an example of them. All right, shall we get to it? So I already showed you the swatch cards, and what I did was, for this specific video, just so that I didn't have to go digging while I'm trying to share with you, I quickly pulled out some colors, and I've swatched them out like this. I don't always do this, but it'll be easy for me right now so that the video sort of runs smoothly. But when I'm coloring for myself, I'll just have my swatch cards in front of me, and I'll start working, and I'll just pull out colors as and when I need them and decide which colors I'm going for. So I don't always plan out my pages, but yeah, if it's something you like to do, you can always swatch them out, see what the colors look like together. Like I said, I will be going over with pencils, so I haven't gone for very dark colors, but I have tried to pull out some light, medium and darker tones to show you guys how I use them. All right, so I have that on my side, and I will just zoom you guys in a bit. Hopefully you guys can see. I don't know why this page drew me. Oh yeah, the other thing, I would always put a paper on the back. I put a couple of papers to protect. Now, I always do that for all my coloring, even when I don't use alcohol markers, but specifically for alcohol markers, it's going to bleed through. So you don't want to if you don't want to ruin your next page, then I would recommend putting papers. You can also use the actual, so Ohuhu actually in their sets of markers, give these plastic paper protective pages that you can put under your coloring. Now, they're a lot smaller than majority of our pages, and so I don't tend to use that much. I usually keep it on the side for when I'm doing swatching like that, but I just use normal paper on the back. And I usually put one more when I'm working in a very thin book, just on the other page. But yeah, even when I'm not using alcohol markers, I tend to put it, because even though I spray my pages with fixative, sometimes, depending on how much pressure I'm putting when I'm coloring, the colors I've used on one specific page can go onto this page. Or if it was just a plain page, sometimes the black ink does transfer, and I don't like that. So I always put protective papers. But yeah, let's get to it. All right. So like I said, these are the colors I've sort of chosen. Let's see how it goes, and we'll see if I get to the coloring side of things. All right. So like I said, 2 ways of doing it is either basing or shadowing, and I'll try and show you both on this particular page. And I would say there's a couple of different methods of applying. Now, I don't know what the right method is. I've not tried to search videos to check how the right way of coloring with alcohol markers is. I've just tried to figure out what works for me. Now, you could basically work from, I would say you could always work from light, like apply your light, and then, so basically, all right, I'll start from the beginning. So 3 ways of using it. I would say you can go from applying your light shade, your lightest shade. So if I show you here, okay, the lightest shade is actually this BG4, which is mint blue. From the caps, it doesn't look like it. But if you look at it, BG4 looks darker from the caps, but it is lighter on paper. Then we have BG68 and we have PB9, all right? So the first method of applying alcohol markers could be going from your light to your dark shade. So first you apply your light, then you put your medium from the shadow areas into your highlight areas, and then you use your dark from the shadow areas into the highlight areas, all right? The second way is to go from possibly dark, medium to light, which is the method I tend to sort of use with my coloring. So I always go for a dark shade, then I go to the medium, then I go to the light, and I'll then deepen up my shadow areas, which in this case I would do with pencils. So you could go from dark, medium to light. I think for me, that would probably use the least amount of marker ink because it's just my natural way of coloring. However, for some reason, what I'm finding I like doing is a third method, which is first laying down a base, which is going to be my light shade, so the BG4. Then I go to my darkest shade, and then I go to the medium, and if I need to blend out my medium into the light, then I'll use my light. So that's, I know, a bit strange. I don't know what other people do, but that's how I find myself coloring with the alcohol markers. So that's the third option. I think the first option would use the least ink. No, sorry, the second option, which is going dark, medium, light, would use the least ink, I think, and easy blending. I find the first option quite hard, and I think I would end up using quite a bit of marker ink, which is going light, medium, dark, and then to blend it all together, you would probably use maybe the medium again and then the light again. I'm hoping this is making sense. Should I just show you? Let me show you. So if I bring out this, sorry, I'll just move the book to the side, okay, for a second, because it might be easier to just show it to you guys. I've got my protective sheet on the bottom. All right, so the first option, like I said, would be to use the light, which in this case is BG4, yeah? So say we do that, okay? And then go to the medium, which is BG68. And then go to the dark, which is PB9. Now I think that won't be a perfect blend, so I'll go back to my BG68, which is the mid-tone, to try and blend the dark tone into it. And then I would end up going back to my light, which is the PG4, to blend the medium section into the light, okay? It gives you a good blend, it does, but it uses quite a bit of marker ink because you're going back and forth quite a lot. So I don't tend to use that method, but that's method number one. Method number two, like I said, which is more natural for me when I use pencils especially, is going from the darkest to the lightest. So PB9, and this is the one I feel would use less ink, BG68, which is the mid-tone, and then BG4. There we go. And I don't tend to go over back again. So I prefer that method. It's easier. But the method I feel like I tend to use the most is first using my light. I'll try it again today. So I'm still learning as well. If you guys have any tips, do let me know. So I've put the light one, which is BG4. Then I'm going in my darkest this time. So in the shadow area. PB9. Then I go in with my midtone, which is BG68, to blend that in. And then I go in with my lightest again, just to blend that into the light. And that's the method I tend to use. I think the blend is, like I said, the easiest way, if you've never used alcohol markers, is the option number 2, going from the darkest to the lightest. Dark, medium, light. And you don't have to go back and forth between the colors. And it blends really nicely. And like I said, you have to work quick, even with alcohol markers. Otherwise, if it dries up, especially on normal paper, then you can get a bit of streaking with the markers as well. And you can see it all goes through. But yeah, so those are the 3 ways I would say you can use alcohol markers. And I'll see if I can sort of vary between them. But that's the method I tend to use. But now when I'm looking at it, that might be a good option. But I think I tend to use the one where I put down the light layer first, is because I get down color quickly and it's a base, and then I just work with it. And sometimes I decide to use the pencils only. So I might just base and then I'll go and use the pencils. But I think that looks like the easiest one to work with. All right, guys, let me bring back the page. And let me just keep this here in case I need it. All right, so I haven't put too much thought into this page because I wanted to quickly come in here and start sharing it with you guys. Yeah, let's see what we get. So I've got the 3 blue colors. I'll try and remember to put the colors, first of all, in the description box below. And then I'll try and see if I can also put it on the screen as well, because if I put this anywhere, it's just going to block your view. It's such a big paper, but it's quite handy actually having that out there. I don't usually have that for all my pages, but might speed up my coloring. I might have to think about that. But then that would mean I would have to plan every single page, which would be annoying. All right. Let me get to it. So I'm going to do for me, the background first, which is I've decided it's water. We have water there. Maybe that's not water. I was going to do it all the same color. Yeah, I'm just going to do it as water, with the frogs like leaping from vine to vine. So I'm just going to do it the same color, I think, because that's what I had in mind to begin with. Yeah, I'm just going to do it all the same. So I'm going to use the blues for the water. So we have the lightest shade, which is BG4. Then we have BG68. And we have PB9. All right. And which method am I going to use first? I think I'm going to use the method of my preferred method that I tend to use, which is first put down the light shade and then, okay, now let's do method 2, which is the easiest. So for someone who is a beginner, the easiest method. So let's go for our dark to light, okay? So PB9. I haven't actually thought this through. Oh, I'm nervous. All right, let's do this. I haven't even thought of how I wanted to do this. Okay, let's just go for it. I'm going to just go for dark and see what happens. I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put my highlight area, which I think I might just bring down to that bit. Okay. Now, on Amazon, every paper behaves differently. So for example, when I used it in the mythographic book, I didn't have much bleeding across the, I'm going in with my midtone, across on the page. But with Amazon paper, it tends to just spread, unfortunately, which you have to be careful with because it can go over your line art, which is a bit frustrating because you can't work as fast as you would think you should. And you can see it's quite dark at the moment, but it does lighten up. Going in with the light shade, which is BG4. So this is the second method I said was going from dark to light shades. And you have to work carefully on this Amazon paper because it does spread. So if you need to, don't go right up to the line art because it will just go through. So don't like the blend here as much, so you can go over it to blend it out. Now, I don't worry about my blends too much because I'm going to use pencil over the top. So if you can sort of see a harsh line between your blends and you're going to use pencil, it's not a problem. But if you're not and you want it to be a, you know, a finish, a marker finish, then you'll need to work on making sure your blends are really good. All right. So there it did dry up a little bit, so it wasn't a perfect blend. But I might change to using my method in a minute, but let's see. So I'm still going in with that second option of going from dark shades to light shades. On this, like I said, on Amazon paper, it dries up quite fast because it's just soaking in. Look, I've gone over the line art there, because it's just bleeding. So yeah, you just have to keep in mind what paper you're sort of working with. And one thing to keep in mind is if you're not able to work as fast, if you're going to have to stop, try and stop at an area where there's a good stop, like at a, you know, like a line art. So for example, here where the streaking won't show. It's hard to show, but here you can see the streaking. But if I finished at the arm, it would not have shown as much. The transition, the sudden transition. Because yeah, on Amazon paper, it's a bit harder. But like I said, I don't worry too much because I like to use pencils over the top. I will be using pencils over the top. This is the mid-tone, I think, PG68. Going in with the BG4. So if you were going to do a marker finish, you can also spend a bit more time on choosing your colors. So for example, in this case, you could try and choose another color to transition from the darkest shade, PB9, to the mid-tone, BG68, to give a better transition, yeah? Because clearly, that's not the perfect transition. But like I said, when you're using pencil, you're not too worried about it, all right? Or I'm not too worried about it. Okay. So you can clearly see that transition there, which is probably my use more than anything, or the paper. It might be worth just taking off the lids to be faster as well, because obviously with this paper you have to work fast. Just have your lids off. This is the mid-tone. I'm just going over everything because I'm trying to see if I could get that perfect transition, but there we go. All right. So I've had to go over a few times to get a good transition. So something to think about if you're not using pencil. All right. Now let me try my method, which I say I like to use most often. Okay. Let's try my method, okay? So for my method, I like to go from, should I take off the lids? Maybe. Also, never pull your pens over your paper because they can leak. So I would always recommend doing it on the side. Don't pull it really hard over open it really hard over your paper. All right, I'm going with the lightest shade this time, all right? So I'm going to use BG4, which is my lightest shade, and I am going to try and just apply a base. Now, I'm trying to do it such that if you were someone who wanted to just use markers, you get a good blend. But sometimes I let it dry, and I by the time I get back to this bit, it is going to be dry, and you will see the transition of the markers. And I don't mind as long as I'm putting in my shadows, because I know that I'll be going back in with pencil. So you just have to plan out what you're going to do, really. Okay. So I'm trying to work fast. See, if I wanted to stop, I'd stop somewhere where the line art is quite close and people wouldn't be able to see the transition of my colors, or that I've stopped, because it creates a harsh line. So for example, here I've stopped. That is probably now going to dry with a streak, like it would dry with a streak. So try and stop if you need to in areas where the transition won't show as much. So for example, right here where the line art is so close together, and if I was to start there, once it's dried, it should be okay. So yeah, I've noticed on Amazon paper, the pen spreads, so you have to be close when you're getting, you have to be careful when you're getting close to line art. I didn't feel that with the mythographic, so it was so much fun using it on the mythographic paper, because I didn't have to worry as much. Like for example, in these tiny areas, it's likely to just go over the line art. Okay, so now my preferred method, hopefully it works. I don't know if it'll work on this paper, but sometimes I like to just leave it as a base. That's what I was saying. And I'll go in with my pencils and do my work. But I wanted to show you guys how I use the alcohol markers otherwise as well. So I'm now going to go in with my dark tone. And I'm going to now try to be a bit more mindful of where I stop. Because I want to see if I can get a better transition. So stopped there, going from my mid-tone, going over my dark tone a little bit, pulling it down into the highlight area, going back to my light tone now to blend it in, because obviously the light tone has dried up, and we do that. And I think that transition is better. It's easier for me for some reason when I'm using markers. When I use pencils, I like to go dark to light. When I'm using markers, light base, then I work with my dark medium and then just finish off with my light. So going back to my dark. This is quite a bit of shading for me for when I'm going over with pencil, to be honest. I think I would do a lot less. So I would probably not go for this darkest shade PB9. I would put that in with pencil. But again, I'm just experimenting as well as trying to show you guys. I've got my lids open, guys. So it's easier to quickly just swap as well. I'm going to stop there, near those leaves. Figure out where I want to stop, go for my mid-tone, just go over the dark tone. But see, the dark tone has already dried up on this paper, which is a shame. So you could, if you're that bothered, but then I don't want to make it as much darker, but if you wanted to, you could just go back over the top, okay? But I'm not that bothered. I'm just going to carry on the way I normally do. So going in with my dark again, going to stop there. Mid-tone. You're always going to get a better blend if you finish. You don't allow the pen to dry up. Where you stop it on paper, you don't allow it to dry, so you don't allow the dry edges. Okay, that's fine. All right, so the first one I did was the dark to light tone. The second one I did was, which worked in this little area, but you can see how it dries up so quickly in a larger area on this kind of paper. But I did my light base, then I went in with dark, medium, and then finishing off with the light. Now, the other method was, and I know it looks a bit different, which is absolutely fine. I will be going in with pencil. All right, the other method was Go light, then medium, then dark, then back to medium, then back to light. Let's try it. This method I never use. It's difficult for me, and because you just, yeah, it just adds more work for me, especially if I'm going to be going over with pencil. Now, the blender pen that comes with the alcohol markers, at first, the very first time I got the alcohol markers, I thought I could use them like mortar-based markers, but I've realized that it's not for that. You can't blend with them. You basically, it's used to highlight areas, so pick up some color. We'll try it here actually, see if it works, but pick up color, or if you've gone over the line somewhere and you want to just get rid of the color there a little bit, you can. You can't get rid of it completely, but that's what it's usually used for. Okay, going in with my mid-tone, is that what we said? Yeah, so I've put down my light. Now I'm going in with mid. Hopefully it doesn't change the look of it too drastically, that my end result is going to be a little bit obviously different, but it's fine. We have a second image in this book, don't we? I'm not a huge fan of second images, but it's there now, so I'll have the option to use it. Now I'm going in with the dark. In my shadow areas, working towards the highlight, but I'm not going to cover up all of the mid-tone, just the areas I want the darkest. You can work in smaller areas maybe, so it doesn't dry up. Now I'm going back to the mid-tone to see if I can blend that in. This is probably the best way of using alcohol markers for blends. Now I'm going to go back in with my light and go into my light. So that's probably the best blend, isn't it, guys? So light tone, mid-tone, dark tone, back to mid-tone, back to light tone. And that's the best blend we got, because it stayed wet in the darkest areas, and so you can't see that obvious transition. So yeah, if you're using it and you're not going to go over with pencil, maybe try that side, that way out. But yeah, you're going to use a lot of ink. All right. All right. Let's try and use the blender pen just for a second, since I spoke about it, and then I will try and put in some more color on this page. All right, so the blender pen is basically a colorless blender. It's got, again, the same tips, so brush tip, broad tip, and it just says 0 colorless blender. All right, and I'm just going to see if it works. I don't know, but basically what they say is it's to pick up color. Mine has mine got any color in it? I don't know if I've used it for any of my pencils, but okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to just try and use it in the highlight area and see what happens. Obviously, we'll have to wait for it to dry and see if it picks up any color, but that's apparently what a colorless blender is supposed to do, just give areas of highlight. And so I assume it should just pick up some of the color. But we'll have to wait for it to dry to see that effect, I guess. So okay, I should probably just leave it to dry now. All right, and we'll see what happens. But I don't tend to use a colorless blender. All right, I like to, once alcohol markers has dried up, for the highlight areas, I like to use just light pencils like a white, and it colors over it really well, and you can get your highlight area. So I don't tend to use a colorless blender to give me my highlights. I just use a white pencil or a very light colored pencil, depending on the situation. But a white pencil will give you your highlights, because you can color over a dark pen and be able to put some white into it. All right, I think the color is lifting a bit there. I don't know if you guys can see. is drying, like you can see a little bit there, ever so slightly, but yeah, I guess you could use that to give a bit of a lighter transition. But yeah, look at those, are awful blends, isn't it? But that's how I use them, and then I go over with the pencils. All right, should I just do the rest to music maybe, of the background? I like to have all of the color done, and then I can speed it up using the same colors, and then I'll come back to it and do the, you can see that. Yeah, the best blend was the one I find the hardest, actually. I might try and do that for the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I'll be back and we'll start putting other colors in as well. All right. Okay, so I'll put this to music. Okay, so doing it this way, the one that uses the most ink, doing light tone, mid-tone, dark tone, back to mid-tone, back to light tone is probably the best blend you're going to get. So if you're someone who just wants to go with marker, I would say use this method. If if you're like me and you're going to go back in with pencil, use any method that you like, all right? But yeah, for the blend, I would say this is probably the best one if you don't want to see any streaking and you want to finish off with a marker finish. All right, guys. So I am probably going to just finish this off camera because it'll be a bit monotonous for you guys. Just this background. I'll be back for the rest of it. Just to share with you the colors and things like that if you guys are following along. But yeah, so I'll be back once I have just finished off the background. All right. Just finishing this off. I feel, maybe it's just me, but I feel that when I'm doing this method, when I'm using alcohol markers compared to pencils, I'm having to concentrate a lot more than I do with pencils. With pencils, it's a bit more easy for me to just zone out. But here, I feel like I'm really having to concentrate so that I don't go over lines, so that it doesn't just sort of, the ink doesn't spread. Maybe it's the paper, but yeah, I'm feeling like I have to concentrate a lot more when I'm using markers, especially if I'm not just doing a base. If I was doing just a base with no shading, it would be really quick. I'd have probably done the background water by now. But when I'm doing the shading, I'm concentrating a lot more. So if you like to zone out, this is probably not the best medium to use. But yeah, let me go finish the rest off camera. I'll do this and I'll also do the center and I'll be back. I'll be just using the same colors for the center. Going dark to light, but with a shadow under the fish right here, possibly. You'll see it when I'm back. All right, be right back. Okay, guys, so that's the background done. And one thing I wanted to mention, I just realized while I was coloring, is that although the markers dry up lighter, yeah, once you've applied it and once it dries, it looks a bit lighter. The more you go over your markers, the darker they'll become as well. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your colors. So say you wanted to be really a lot lighter, then go for lighter colors if you had them. Or in my case, if I wanted it to be lighter, I could have just done a base and then gone over with the pencils, because I know I'm going to go over with the pencils again. So yeah, just keep that in mind, that the more you go over, layering with your pencil, with your markers, the markers will continue to get darker and darker. All right. Okay, so now literally I think I've basically shared everything with you. Obviously I might want to also share with you guys how I do my pencil over the top, but I'd rather put some more color with the markers down first and then go over with the pencil. So I use my Albrecht Dürer pencils, and because of that, the alcohol markers will sort of pull the colors. So when I'm working with these, I try, either I be really careful if I want to do bits and bobs. So say I've done the background and I go over with the pencils and then I want to use marker for another area. I have to be a bit careful that I'm not going to pull my pencils and smudge them all. It can possibly also happen with other pencils, because I tried using this blender pen, the colorless blender, for my Pablos, which are not water-based pencils, and they did blend them as well, which was really nice. So I really like it for normal pencils as well. Because I'm used to blending out colors with my Albrecht Dürers, I think I enjoyed using the Pablos with the blender pen. All right. So it can happen with normal pencils as well. So I would recommend, if you're going to work with pencils, do your marker work first, so that at least you're a bit more relaxed, that you're not going to ruin your page by smudging colors, and then go ahead and start working with your pencils. But if you don't know what colors you're going to do on the whole page, then that's fine. Just carry on and just be careful when you are using your pencils. Okay, so now I'm going to use some greens. So I have a GY172, it's these ones, GY1 and G2, all right? So these are the colors I'm going to use now. And majority of my greens on this page will be that color, but I'm also going to bring in some different greens just to differentiate it a little bit, maybe for the frogs, maybe for certain leaves. But I think the vine or the border, I'm going to try and be a brighter. Usually I go for the yellow greens, which obviously I have picked here, but I decided to go for slightly brighter greens. All right, so I'm just going to work with them, and I'm going to work the way I normally would now. So I'm going to change it up and just use my base, my light color, then I'll go for the dark medium. All right, so that's how I tend to use them. But if you're doing large areas, I think that method of using the light, then the medium, then the dark, going back to your medium, going back to your light will give you the best blend for larger areas. But I'm going to use my method now, okay? So like I said, you can also just base. So if you wanted to, and if you were going to work, I'm going in with my lightest shade first, which is GY172. And you can just lay down the color and then just go over and do all your work in pencil. And that's what I tend to do quite a lot, not just with alcohol markers, even with my water-based markers, but I'll show it to you with shading as well. So if I was to literally just base it, this is all I would do. I'd use my lightest shade so that it behaves as the highlight shade that I want my highlight areas to be, so that I don't have to go over the highlight areas with pencil. I just work in the shadow areas and maintain my highlight as the base. So this is literally what I would do. I just go over, and it's so much quicker for me, especially because I know I'm still going to go over with pencil. So if I'm doing shading with markers and then also shading with pencils, it just adds the amount of time, the longer I'm going to take to finish a page. So for me, this is probably the one that makes sense, but I like to play sometimes and do the shading as well. Maybe for those of you who want to use pencil and want less amount of work to be done with pencil, then do the shading part and then go over with your pencils ever so slightly. Yeah, so people who may have problems with their hands and can't use pencil that much, it hurts, you know, you can't use it for a prolonged time, maybe this method would really work well for you. So just going over with your markers, putting in some shading, and ever so slightly just deepening up your shadow areas with a pencil, and that's your job done. Okay, so at least you don't have to work too much with pencil then, because with the markers you're not putting much pressure, you're literally holding the pen very lightly, and you can just, you know, go ahead and base it. I'm just leaving my lily pads at the moment. I don't know what color, or maybe I'll just base them the same color at least, and then decide what to do with them. Are those lily pads? I'm not sure. They look like lily pads. But using markers, you can see that it just lays down color so quickly, and it sort of motivates you to carry on going because you've already put so much color on the page. It doesn't look like you've spent so much time coloring with pencils and you've done like one little portion, you know what I mean? That's my normal situation. And if you don't know what color to do something when you're working with your markers, leave it out. It's fine. You can come back and do it later. That's what I tend to do a lot on my pages, because like I always say, I don't usually plan out my pages. I just go with the flow. And sometimes I don't know what color to do something. So for example, these big leaves, I don't know yet what color I want to do them because it might become too much green. So I'm going to leave those out for now, and I'll see what to do later. Once I've started to put more color on the page, it might become a bit more apparent to me what I want to do with them. So I'm just going to leave them out. And then you can work over with pencil, you can use your paints, you can use watercolor pencils. So I still activate my Albrecht Dürers over the top of my alcohol markers, guys, and it works great. So you can do that. Paint pens, gel pens, whatever you want to use, you can use over the top. Derwent, Inktense. And also, I guess if you were going to use pencil, you can even, normal pencils, and you want to use a blender solution, I'm sure that would work too, wouldn't it? I just don't know if it would pick up a little bit of color for highlight areas like we were trying to do with the blender pen there. So that's something to try out. Okay, what else do I want to do? These vines in the middle. So right now I'm just laying down a base, but I'm going to put in a bit of shadowing. And on small elements like this, for me, because I'm using pencil, I'm not going to worry about making sure my blend is absolutely perfect. For a background, it matters a little bit more because you don't have to go over the entire background with pencil. You just want to neaten it out so that the transitions don't show. But on small areas, it's easier to do those transitions. So with pencil, like, it doesn't take as much time. So I would not worry about having harsh lines between the different shades. I hope you guys are enjoying this video. I'm still learning, you know, with alcohol markers, but they're definitely very useful in books like this one. That's a leaf. I might do that a different color. That's 10. I might do a different color, a different green, I mean. So I'm going to leave it out for now. This is becoming more like a color and chat or a full color along, isn't it? It's quite long already. This one, let's do this the same green. I thought I would be a lot quicker with this video, but and do it in one sitting, but I might have to actually stop because I'm going to have to go and get my son in a bit from school, and it's pouring outside. I tend to go walking to pick up my son from school, and we walk back. It's just afternoon. I pick him up at 1 o'clock, so it's usually nice to walk back. But yeah, it's pouring today. I hope it stops by the time I have to go get him. Anything else? Anything else? Those ones? Maybe those ones? Let's just do those ones. Obviously, when I come in with pencil, I can use different pencils over the top as well to just change up the colors a bit. So even if the base is the same, the pencils I choose can be slightly different just to give a different effect. All right, hopefully I haven't missed anything for this color. Now, I've got my I tend to go in with my dark tone now. So this is G2, and I would put the dark tone in the dark areas. So I start putting in a little bit of shadows so that when I come to do the pencil work, there's less shading needed. Although I'm an exception in this world because I still go over the top with my layers when I come to my pencils. I love doing that. You guys know that. But for the rest of you, for those who are not excessive like me, you will not need to go over with your pencils as much, okay? So I'm putting shadows in areas where I want certain elements to pop off, like I normally do with my pencils. Yeah, so gone in with my darkest shade, probably leave the lid off, mid-tone, which is GY1. And just keep in mind how you normally do your pencil work, where you keep your highlights. Yeah, so that's what I do. So go in, so this leaf, so for example, I'm keeping the darker area of this rim on the outside. I want it to look like this area here is sort of popping off the page, so it looks like the water is sort of more inset. I want these lily pads to be looking like they're in front of this frame, the vine frame. I want them to look in front, so I'll be making the areas of the framework darker behind those with my markers, and then I'll neaten it all up with my pencil. So I don't mind the transitions showing now. Dark tone, mid-tone, go back in with your light tone just to blend it out. All right, so let's work here. Again, I want the frogs to look like they're in front of this frame. So let's make it dark near the frog so that they stand out. Can make the rim a bit darker. Be careful, especially if you're using such a dark color, not to go over the line art. This is where I feel like I need to concentrate more. I think I'm going in with my light medium tone. And then the light tone. And that's why I said, if you're doing shading, you don't even need to go in with pencil if you like the finish, yeah? You can do some paint pen work and that's it. Or do a little bit of shadows now and that's it, yeah? So it speeds up the coloring process for a lot of people other than me. This is the light tone. There we go. So you can already see it coming to life with a bit of shadows, isn't it? And you don't even have to go over the light if you're going to go over with pencil. Allow that harsh line. It's absolutely fine if you're going over with pencil, yeah? I'm literally, like I normally do with pencils, going from my dark areas with to the highlight areas. That's how I shade with pencils. Dark areas to highlight areas always work in that direction for me. And then if I need to deepen up, so when I do it with pencils, I would use my medium tone and then my light tones going into the highlight tones, yeah? And then I would go back into my shadow areas. I've explained this so many times actually. Go back into my shadow areas and deepen up my shadows. With the pens, I'm going with my dark, I've done my base, but I'm going with the dark, the medium into the highlight area. And then my pencils will deepen up my shadow areas, yeah? But if you're using markers only and you want to try and deepen up your, I can't talk and use markers. If you want to deepen up your shadows with even a darker shade of a marker, you can do that if you're doing a marker finish. Okay, nice. I like that. I like that it's a brighter green. Hopefully you guys can see well. And yeah, that's basically how I'm doing the line. And RJ Hampson has very kindly put in these sort of lines, if you see it, to show you where the shadows can be. You can of course ignore it, you can use it. I tend to use them to my advantage when artists do that, because they've basically told us, okay, put your highlights or your shadow areas here, and I tend to use it for that. I'm not thinking about light source that much, because I'm just basically working on trying to make some elements in the pop off look like they're in the front, rather than worrying too much about which areas should be more highlighted. So I'm not working with light source too much on this page, okay? But you can see, look how dark that area looks, and look how much it has lightened up when it's dried, yeah? So always keep that in mind as well, especially if you're going to go over with pencil as well. So you have to just think about what colors you're using. All right, so I'll probably put again this to music, because again it'll become quite repetitive. I'll just do it off screen so it's not too long a video actually, because this is exactly how I'm going to do the vines throughout. All right, I don't know how to do the lily pads yet, so maybe can't remember what a lily pad looks like. Is it darker on the edge, lighter on the edge, dark to light? Which I have my mid-tone. Let's do that. So let's say I'm going to go from dark to light, but along these lines. It's not, doesn't have to be so realistic, right? It's not a realistic page, so it shouldn't matter too much. You can always darken up with pencil then, right? And the edge, I think I'm just going to put a little bit of shadowing near the stem bit and then leave it. And then I can see, yeah, I think that's fine. And then I can always darken up a bit. This little dot in the middle, I'm just going to make that a dark dot. All right, so that's how I'm going to do the lily pads. And yeah, I don't think you guys need to watch the rest, right? This is not exactly a color along, it's just showing you how I use my pens. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do the rest of the vines, and then I'll be back again to add some more color to the page. Okay guys, so that is the vines and some of the leaves and the lily pad sort of leaves done, and I'm just going to work on basically laying down the rest of my alcohol markers. Now I've actually already put in quite a bit of shading, and normally I wouldn't always do that, but it really does help. It already brings everything to life. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'll do the rest of it to music. I'll share the colors I'm using on screen, so you know, in case you did want to base along with me. Yeah, so I'll share the colors of the Ohuhu markers I'm using, and I'll just quickly base this because I do want to show you how I use my pencils over the top, if you're someone who would want to use pencils as well. I think if you wanted to just do marker coloring, all of this will be perfectly fine, just leaving it as that, because you have your shadows, you have your highlights. It's already creating that 3D sort of effect that I like to get with my pencils, and you don't need to do much else if you didn't want to. But I want to show you how I use my pencils, so I will quickly go and base this. When I say quickly, you guys know I'm a little bit slow, so it'll take a while, but I'll be speeding it up for you guys. Yeah, then I can at least show you a little bit of the illustration with pencil. All right, so I'll be right back with everything based, but I'll do it to music. Okay guys, so that's all the alcohol marker work done. Now, I just want to summarize it because this video is actually just about how I use my alcohol markers in colouring books. The add-on is just going to be me just showing maybe a little bit of pencil over the top and what difference it can make. If you were doing just alcohol marker work, this is perfect. Add a little bit of embellishments. There are certain areas I've left uncoloured because I would possibly use my paint pens, my glitter gel pens, and just add embellishments, add highlights to the page with my paint pens or a white Posca pen. And even the white on the bird, I think it's a heron, I'm not sure. I searched, for some reason heron came to my mind, and I searched it online and it looked like that kind of bird, and so that's why I went for a black and white, and I thought that was good because it would just break it up. So it's good I checked it out because I would have not known what color to do that bird. But even the white on the bird looks good, just with a little bit of that hints of grey, green grey that I used. And you could have done a bit more shading on the frogs, but I've kept it quite light because I am thinking there's a lot of greens here, and when I come in to do my pencil work, I'm going to try and differentiate the frogs a little bit from the rest of the greenery around here. So I've kept it light. I just based it with one pen rather than putting any shading in there. But yeah, go ahead, do your paint pen work, do your glitter gel pen work, and the page is done. But if you want to go on to do the pencil work, then I'll show you a little bit of that. So I'm just going to summarize this. So basically, I always swatch out my markers because it's not consistent always with the caps. Sometimes they look a little bit, the caps colors look a little bit darker than the actual pens are. Sometimes once they've dried, they look lighter. So I always like to swatch out my alcohol markers. So I would always do that. I use them for basing and for shading as well. As you've seen, I've tried to show a few ideas of how I use it on my pages. I've done quite a bit of shading on this page to show you that you can just do shading and leave it at that. I've done basing in certain areas like those yellows, those greens. I'm going to go in and I'm still going to do shading even on my bird. I'm still going to go in and do some shading with my pencils. But you can even do, so you could just apply a base, flat base with no shading, and then use your pencils. But doing it this way is quicker. I don't think I do pages this fast with my pencils. And then when you go in with the pencils, you just have to use a little bit of pencil work, and the page would be done. So basing or shading, you can choose the kind of pens you want to get, either a brush tip and a broad tip, or there's a broad tip and a bullet tip or something. So whatever you prefer. I really like the brush tips. That's what I tend to use the most, even for the thin areas. As you've seen, that's the only tip I used. Now, just to remind you, sorry, I have done a review on Ohuhu alcohol markers, but they do have you can buy their tips separately. If you do fray your tips or anything, you can get them and change them. And also they do have refills for their markers now, which is brilliant. Which is why I'd never really bought Ohuhus yet, or tried them out, because I was like, when I finish a marker, and if you're using it this much, they could finish quite fast. Then what am I going to do? So I'm so glad they have refills and they have stock pens as well. So that's brilliant. And we use the different types of applications. So we said the first one could be, what did we say again? So light, go from your light to your medium to your dark. So if I just get some pens out here. So light first, medium next, and dark. Or you could go from the dark to the medium to the light, which was quite easy for blending. Don't use too much ink. With the first method, where you go light, medium, dark, you'd probably need to also then go over with your light to blend it all together, yeah? And then with the dark, medium, light, unlikely to have to go over it again, which is why it would save on ink. And then the last one, is the method I tend to use sometimes, is just base it first with your base, your lightest color, then go in with the dark, and then the medium, and then a little bit if you need to with the light, which is what I did for a lot of the greens here. Sorry, the first one where you go from light, medium, light, dark, you're going to then need to go back to your medium and then back to your light as well to get a good blend, yeah, which worked really good for the background. So those are the types of applications. And then do I prefer water-based or alcohol markers? I like them both. It depends on the situation, the paper I'm using. Is it a double-sided book? Is it a single-sided book? Am I doing a large area? Am I doing a smaller area? Do I want to use it off a palette? If I do, then it has to be a water-based marker. So I like both, and I'll change it up depending on the page I'm coloring. All right, so that looks really nice, actually. I feel like, okay, I've done a page and I've done it super fast and I should just call it as done. But you guys know me and I like to go in with my pencils. And so, yeah, maybe I should show you a little bit of pencil work and just to show you the difference it's going to make. And then, yeah, we'll see where we go from there. But if we're only interested in the alcohol marker bit, then that's how I use my alcohol markers and it's all done. All right, guys. So I'm going to pull out some pencils and I'll be back again. Okay, guys, so I've pulled out some pencils for the water or the background area, and I've been asked by people how I choose what pencils go over my base. I'm going to use my Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. For now, I'll use them dry. I'll see how they go down on the paper and then I'll decide, okay? But I can always activate them with water if I need help blending, or you could always use blender pencils or blender pen if you'd like. But yeah, so I'll use my Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. Now, when I'm choosing what pencils to bring out, usually my aim of the pencil work is to deepen up my shadows a little bit more, because as you guys know, I love dark shadows because I feel that's what helps. The contrast between my dark areas and my light areas is what helps things pop, and it just gives more emphasis on the 3D aspect of an illustration, which is what I really enjoy doing. So it's not something you have to do, but that's what I enjoy doing. So my aim of what kind of pencils to go over the top, especially when I've already done so much shading, would be to maybe choose something a little bit darker for the shadows, a pencil a little bit darker for the shadows, just to deepen up those shadows a little bit more, and in large areas especially, a color that will just help me blend out that transition that I did with my markers if they're showing up especially. I don't necessarily need to do that in areas that are smooth, but if they were not smooth, then that's what I would want to do, to just smooth them out. So usually for the backgrounds. And then I also choose a highlight color, or a color that is lighter than your highlight shade you've used for the pen. Now, usually I go very light for my pen, so I don't always need it. But for example, here where the heron, I've done like a solid dark gray, I'm going to put in some highlights. So I would use a pencil, a white pencil, for example. Or in this area, if I want to lighten up, I already did it with the blender pen, which actually has worked pretty well. I like that highlight, but I've not done it on these areas with the blender pen. So I haven't lifted up a bit of color to give the highlights. So I'm just going to show it to you with the pencil, a white pencil, just to show you how you can bring back some highlight if you need to. So what I do is basically I take my swatch, the pens I've used, for example. So in this case, first, I'm going to be working with the blues. So I'll hold it up against my pencil swatch. This is why I love swatching, guys. It just saves time, not looking for pencils and swatching them and stuff. But I hold it up against my pencil swatches and try and look for shades that are going to work over the top as closely as possible. So I have a light cobalt turquoise in the Albrecht Dürers that will work as a light shade. I have a cobalt turquoise. I have helio turquoise, cobalt green, which will work with the mid-tone we used for the marker. And cobalt turquoise, I think, will work with the dark shade. And then helio turquoise can be that little bit of a shadow. And if you want even more shadow, I've picked out a dark indigo and I've got a white on the side. So I picked out 5 pencils. I'm not necessarily going to need to use them all, but I'll show you what I do. So other than the dark indigo, my darkest shade would be the helio turquoise. All right. So first I'm going to show you deepening up of the shadows. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in this area where the transition is not that great, so we can see whether we can smooth that transition out. All right, so first I'm going to go in with my Helio Turquoise, which is the darkest shade other than the dark indigo. And just to check the shade of the color, and that works really well. So I don't necessarily need to work on this. This looks exactly the same as the color I've got laid down. So I need a lighter shade to transition between the two. So let's go for the Cobalt Turquoise. All right. You could go over all of that in pencil if you wanted. All right. So we'll see how that goes. But to begin with, what I'm going to do is with my Cobalt Turquoise, I'm going to go over the dark pen I used and then sort of smooth it out into the mid-tone pen marker that I'd used, just to get rid of that harsh line and to transition. Yeah. And that sort of just gets rid of that harsh line that we had there and helps blend it out like you would have done with pencils. But it takes less time because we've already done all the work with the pens. Yeah. So that looks already a little bit better. And then I'll go in with my Cobalt Turquoise just to help with that blend. So go over my Cobalt Green, go over my Cobalt Turquoise, and still work into my highlight area. See, we've got rid of that harsh transition that we had with the markers. So if you get those transitions, this is how I tend to correct it, which is why I said I don't worry too much when I have those harsh transitions. I don't spend too much time on blending with my markers because I know I'm going to go in with my pencils and I can get rid of that harsh line. There we go. And then if you think you need to, you can go in with your lightest shade that we had, which we matched up with the light shade of the pens, which is the light Cobalt Turquoise. Just go over all of it, make sure it's nice and smooth. You can use a pencil blender at this stage if you want to make sure there's no pencil strokes, because of course the rest of it is marker. You don't want it to look obvious that you've put pencil down right in the middle of your marker work. And there we go. So we've basically given a nice transition now. And like I said, so Helio Turquoise didn't really help because it's exactly the same shade as that dark shade. So just to deepen up my shadow areas, I've got a dark indigo, and the areas I wanted darker, I'm going to use it right there to just help with my, that pop I like. Yeah. So wherever you've got your shadows is where you would put the darkest shade. And just, so I'm putting medium pressure, and then I'm going very light-handed because we want it to smooth out into our marker base. There we go. So I haven't covered the entire marker base that we laid down, but it already looks quite nice, adding that deeper shadow and just sorting out that transition, the harsh transition that we had. There we go. What do you guys think? I think that works really well, doesn't it? And then just make sure if you're using a white pencil that it's clean, and you can add in some more highlight. So we already lightened the area up a bit, but let's see if it does any more, and it does. So you just go over if you want to highlight any more. You don't have to. I'm just showing that you can. And that helps with the contrast, the massive contrast between your dark and your light. So if I bring in my dark here as well, and I still have to sort out my transition, but there we go. Hope this is useful, but this is how I do it. And already, I guess it would have taken a lot more time if I did a pencil background, for example. Even if I activated my pencils with Albrecht Dürers with water, I would usually go over the top again. So doing a marker base is quicker and then just going and with the shading already put in, and then just going in and deepening up those shadows a little bit more. Now, in areas where we might, let me see, yeah, which we didn't use the blender pen to lift up some color, just to show you that you can highlight that area too. So it is a bit darker than this area here, yeah? So let's see if I can just put in my pencil work right there to highlight, to just lighten up that area. So if you lose your highlight a little bit, nothing to worry about, you can bring it back. See? So now it's nicely lighter in that area, okay? And then, since we're here, I'll just show it to you. For the heron, I've done it quite dark on this bottom bit here, for example. Sorry, I'm just getting a black pencil out. So to bring back the highlight, you can do two things. Either use a very light grey or use a white. Let's try a light grey actually. Do I have it sharpened? Let's go for a cold grey 2, okay? And I want to bring back the 3D aspect of this leg, for example. So we know that this part here, I think it might be a bit hard. Oh, you can see the line. I'd gone over with the pen, so we've lost that 3D aspect of the leg. So let's bring in a bit of a shadow with our black. Because we didn't use black, we used a grey. We can put in a bit of a darker shadow, which is why I used a grey, because I knew I wanted to put in a bit of shading, and then put a bit of lighter grey there. See? Now here, on this outer part of the leg, again, we can bring back our shading. You can do this with paint pens too. If you just wanted to put one line and weren't going to do any pencil work, you could use paint pens to just put in a highlight line there, and you'll bring back your highlight, yeah? See? So it's not so flat anymore. So here, I'm going to darken up this part of the leg. I'll assume that this part is sort of hitting light, and this part here, and then this bit is darker, so I'm going in with my black. Same thing here. This is under those feathers. Sorry, I feel like I got a bit quiet. Under those feathers will be dark because it will be in shadow. And then just a tiny little bit of a highlight right there. Yeah? It brings it back a little bit, doesn't it? You can put a bit of a highlight here to make it look like it's the leg. I mean, that it's in front of that bit there. How does that look on camera? Yeah, I think that works, doesn't it? And then if I just bring back the head here, because we have the dark grey there, where should we put the highlight? Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to put it at the tips. Yeah. Obviously, if you wanted to make the bird look realistic, then it will be hard with marker because you won't be able to get your strokes in unless you use a very light color. If you used a lighter base, then you can obviously use darker pencils to give a bit of, yeah, a bit of strokes like you can see me doing now. There we go. Yeah. And it'll show up more if you used a lighter base. So this is me just adding, because I like I like contrast between my lights and darks. I'm not a huge fan of flat coloring unless I'm completely mindless coloring. I love to do layering and shading and things like that, which is why I like to come in and do a little bit of touch-ups. There we go, see? So it was such a dark color, yet, sorry, I'll just zoom out again. Yeah, so it was such a dark color, yet just by using a very light pencil, we can color over the marker and we can bring back some highlights and a little bit more of the 3D, and so it doesn't look so flat. You can even go in, if you were to use a white, for example, it'll obviously show up more, but you got the idea, right? You can just play around with it. So 2 things we've looked at: how to get rid of our harsh transitions, how to deepen up our shadows, how to lighten our highlights and bring back that 3D effect. So yeah, I can do a little bit of greens as well if you'd like, and again, I'll just show you, my pencil is still clean. For example, these pink flowers, I'm still going to deepen them up, but I don't like that I've got absolutely no highlights. So even with the pink, I can bring back my, just lighten it up a bit. And I would use, in this particular case, I'm going to use paint pen as well. So I already knew that. So that will also help with the lightening up those edges, because it'll just emphasize a lighter tip of the petal compared to the central once I get rid of that black line. And I'm going to deepen up the middle of the flower, which will also help with the contrast. See? But I'm not coloring the entire petal. Similar to this, I didn't really color all of it to get those shades. What pinks should I use? So I used very different pinks on this particular page. I could use magenta, or the red violet might be nice. I might just try and see if my tiny, teeny red violet and maybe middle purple pink. It's going to be very different colors, but yeah, okay, let's try it. So I'm working still on that one there. I'm going to go in with my middle purple pink first. I've kept this page quite simple in that, for example, my flowers are completely pink. There's no yellow and things like that in it. Because I wanted to just show you how I use my markers. I didn't want to put too much thought into it. It would take me forever to have planned the video. So I just decided, okay, let me just get these particular markers out and just go for it. Could have sharpened that a bit more, but yeah. And then maybe, which one did I use? Middle purple pink. I can then use maybe a light purple pink, and then we'll see if we need anything else, just to sort of transition it into the marker. It's okay, isn't it? I think that's nice. Middle purple pink. Red violet for the shadow. And these, the bits that I've not colored, I would probably go in, and I've mentioned this on many of my color alongs, but I like to leave some out for some glitter or metallic gel pens, just for embellishments, to give my page a little bit of sparkle. So I do tend to leave some bits and bobs on the page uncolored till the end. So for example, the center of these flowers, I will probably put in some glitter gel pen, probably a gold in this case, like a yellow gold. There we go. So that looks nice, doesn't it? Compared to the flat, these ones. See? All right. So that's how I would tackle the flowers. And like I said, you could even use a bit of water over the top of your markers. And I tend to do that a lot, especially for the backgrounds, although I didn't need to do it much here. You saw how much little bit of work I did with the pencils. I didn't need to go in with the water. Whoops. Let me just zoom out. That bit looks absolutely fine. I don't need to do much more work with the background. So I'm just trying to think what aspect of this page I can use some water on. Okay, shall we use it on these leaves here? They're slightly bigger, so I can show you how I would use. I would spend a bit more time just blending that out, but yeah. So these leaves here, what green? So the greens we used for those were the yellowy greens here. So the kind of greens I like to use, so we can deepen up the shadows with a chrome oxide green, possibly. Maybe use chromium green opaque. I don't want to brighten up those leaves too much, and maybe earth green yellowish if we need to. Let me go in. I don't even know if I need to use water on this page actually. I just wanted to show it to you guys. I don't feel like I need to do much more with pencil work, to be honest. But I've got a chrome oxide green. I've got a chromium green opaque. I'm just trying to think because of my frogs. I need to think about what I'm going to do with my frogs. And I've got an earth green yellowish, all right? Not all of them are sharpened. Let me just sharpen my earth green yellowish. Just using a nice handheld Stedler handheld sharpener right now because my pencil is quite small. So this is the one I'm using, just so in case you were interested. Really good. Look at the point I got. Yeah. So the pencil is too small to go into the electric sharpener, so that's what I use a handheld when that happens. Yeah. All right. And I've got dark indigo here if I need it as well. And maybe if I want to add in some highlights, we can use ivory. All right. Okay, so deepen up my shadows first. I've got chrome oxide green. I'll see if I need to use water, but I do want to show it to you with water. So maybe I'll just do it over the top just for the sake of it so you can see that. Okay, so I'll try not to blend too much so that I can just show it to you guys with activating with water. Okay. I don't even need to use much more. If I was just doing pencil work, I'd be even happy with just making sure I blend that nicely and then going in with my ivory and just adding some highlights at the edges. I would use a paint pen at the end to emphasize my highlighted area, so cover up the black lines, and that is absolutely fine. So that's how much pencil work you need to do. But because I want to show you how I'm going to use if I was to use water, whether it works, or alcohol marker, let's just put in earth green yellowish. Okay, and then I'm just going to get my water and my water brush. Like before I put the water, just know that obviously if I just blended that with the pencils, that would be perfect. You don't need to do this bit, but I just want to show it to you. So I'm using my water brush, going from my highlight area into the shadow area, not with much water at all. This is just to help smooth it out, blend it out. It helps when you're doing backgrounds, large areas, to speed up again the process. if you have the versatility of water-based pencils, it doesn't have to be Albrecht Dürer, whichever ones you prefer, then that's it. Didn't do much because it already looks good, but yeah, there we go. Okay, so it works absolutely fine, and this is Amazon paper. I still use water over my Albrecht Dürer pencils on Amazon paper, but I use such little water, so this entire time I wasn't adding any more water. I should start using a normal brush so I don't have to explain this every time. My water brush is empty. I'm not using water in here. I'm literally using it as a normal paintbrush, just dipping it in water and using it because I just have more control over it that way, especially on paper like this where I don't want much water because yeah, we don't want the paper to pill and things like that. But there you go, look at that blend. Yeah, so it works perfectly fine. You need to let it dry, of course. I've gone in a bit sooner, but I'm going in very lightly with my ivory just to bring back a little bit of the highlights, and we're done. Yeah, so you can use water over the top of alcohol markers as well. So there we go, guys. I don't think there's much else to explain or to share with you guys. I've done a background and shown you how to just even things out. If things get a bit messy with the transition and it doesn't look very good, you can even it out with just a little bit, just a couple of pencils, just to help with that transition. I didn't go over the entire background. I just did it over that transition. I just chose the colors that worked by matching up the swatches of the markers with my pencils. I've deepened up the shadow with a darker shade of pencil than my darkest marker. I've lightened up my highlight areas with white, and that gives such a nice transition for the background. I've shown you how to bring back highlights with a pencil, so you can flat color and then go in with pencils and just bring in all your detailing. And I've shown you that you can use water over the top of the alcohol markers if you wanted. So even if you just did a base of the highlight color of the marker and then gone in with your pencils and you didn't want to spend too much time blending, you can then blend them together either with the blender pen or water. I like to use water. It works well for me. That's another question people ask me a lot. Do I prefer water for blending my pencils or do I prefer a blender pen? I prefer water, again, because I can control how much water I'm applying myself, and I can keep cleaning off the brush. Now with markers, I feel like I have to clean off the marker a lot before I can go back into my highlight area. So it takes a while to get rid of my Albrecht Dürer pencil pigment from the marker blender, the blender pen, before I can go back in. So I prefer the brush because it just quickly wipes off. That's mainly the only reason. Otherwise, the blender pen would be awesome because especially on thin paper, you don't get the warping and all of that you would get with water. So I guess it's personal preference for everyone. For me, I just find that with blender pens, I have to keep wiping them off quite a lot. Yeah, that's it, guys. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you like how this is coming along. I hope you got some nice tips to play around with. I'm still learning with alcohol markers, but I'm really enjoying them. And you get so much done in so little time. I would never get this much done with pencils. If I was working with pencils for the same amount of time I've had to work with alcohol markers, I probably would have done like a little section of the page. So it's really nice just seeing. I know I still have work to do with it for pencil, for my liking. So I still have quite a bit of work to put in there for my liking. But just looking at the page like this, I feel like I've already accomplished so much just by using alcohol markers. So yeah, I do enjoy them. I enjoy both kind of alcohol and water-based markers, but this was just showing you how I use my alcohol markers. So hopefully this was useful. Hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully you picked up some tips. I know a lot of you have been using alcohol markers a lot more or for a lot longer than I have. So you might be able to give me some tips. So give me some tips if you have any. Yeah, I'll see you on the next video. So until then, take care. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.